Dr. Bob here again. I thought I'd spend a little more time on the reopening. I did a long video that I finally got uploaded today. It's a little bit 36 hours since I did it. I think I've got this down now, and these should go up pretty quick. As promised, I already filmed my motivation to exercise and eat right video, and I'll put that up before this one. I want to talk about opening up America again. This is the Fed's plan, the recommendations to the governors. They're not required to follow it. It's a federalist system. This is what's being recommended. I think it's decent. I went over it in some detail in terms of this entire document on the long one that we called the COVID-19 reopen. These proposed state or regional gating criteria, I should tell you that from the graphs that I've seen in the task force yesterday, the symptoms are probably met everywhere. In other words, downward trajectory of influenza-like illness reported within a 14-day period. The graph is just tanked on that. Now that's nationwide, but probably most of the states are seeing the same thing because we're just not out there giving each other any kind of illnesses right now. So symptoms, downward trajectory of influenza-like illness and downward trajectory of COVID-like syndromic cases in a 14-day period. So you're supposed to meet those criteria before you start phase 1, which we went over in some detail. I won't go over that again with this. But I wanted to talk about cases because you're supposed to see a downward trajectory of documented cases within a 14-day period, or a downward trajectory of positive tests as a percentage of total tests within a 14-day period. Because if we're getting a lot more testing equipment available, which we are, you might see an increase in cases when actually the prevalence of the disease is declining. And we're saying, boy, once we see it clearly on the decline, maybe we need to start seeing what of this mitigation strategy we can start to relax on without things going bonkers, okay? So that's the strategy. So that being said, I've been following Alaska pretty closely through this system. I have not been doing the nationwide calculations on a daily basis, but fairly simply, and it's hard to see this one, 3,723,000 tests divided into 724,000 positives gives you a 19.4% positive rate of your tests. So, the testing percentage, they didn't make it clear to me whether that's a day-to-day thing or looking at the cumulative test, but either way should be fairly similar. So I'm going to start keeping an eye on that number every day. But what I have been doing for those of us in Alaska that are wondering when we're even going to be able to start thinking about relaxing things, assuming the governor is going to follow these guidelines, we come down to we're down there, which is good. Alaska. Okay, so here we are. Here's our testing. We're up to 9,655 tests as of yesterday. 314 positives. 314 divided by 9,655 came out to 3.2%. And the day before, it was 3.2%. For a week straight, it's been 3.4%. So we are 2 days, I think, into meeting that first set of criteria. If that trend continues over the next 12 days, it's theoretically possible that we could start talking about lessening some of the social distancing and some of the shutdowns. That's when you can start going into phase 1 and reopen the gyms with real strict protocols, and some other businesses start to reopen, maybe restaurants that are spread out. And so anyways, phase 1 might not be too far away. All right, so the other thing in just talking about testing is that we clearly are testing a lot in this country. I'm going to talk about how difficult testing is, but as of the 18th, we were at 3.7 million, way more than any other country, but we got a big population. We need to test more than most other countries. So a lot of people like to look at the metric of tests per thousand, and Germany did a great job. Germany does great with everything. They raise great dogs, at least if you like to hunt. They're meticulous people. It's not surprising that they pulled that off, and they're doing well. According to the task force yesterday, they have the lowest mortality per 100,000 people. Not per 100,000 people infected, but per 100,000 people in the population. Although we did pretty good, we were second. Of course, Europe's ahead of us, so that's kind of a fake number because we haven't hit our peak yet, or maybe we're just coming up on our peak. So there's going to be more death, and per 100,000 population, we're going to see our number climb. But you know what really matters? At the end of the day, we need to know what percentage of our population died that contracted the disease. And that's going to take this later serological testing to sort that out. That's going to tell us how good our medical system was and whether our mitigation prevented it from being overwhelmed. It will, looking at how many people per 100,000 tells you a combination of how good a job you did mitigating, meaning did you get a lot of disease, and then also did many of them die. So anyways, the numbers are confusing. There's a lot of statistics out there. If you like this statistic, then of the state of the major countries that we would think about, South Korea has been doing really well, and as of yesterday, United States has tested more per capita than South Korea. Italy's ahead of everybody, but they got hit. I don't know that anybody wants to emulate Italy, okay? Okay, the other thing is if you come down and look at tests per day, we're way ahead of anybody. We're doing way more tests per day. So, we're doing a lot of tests. Does it really mean anything? Well, I guess I want to spend a little time talking to you about the tests. Turns out a big part of testing is going to be this antibody test. And so I'm going to post on Facebook Wellness Patients this document that has links to the only 4 tests that have been approved by the FDA. My understanding is this one did not even require emergency use authorization. We were told by Vice President Pence yesterday that it is sensitive and specific, but no numbers were given. These other 3 are tests. We got CellX, Ortho, and Chembio. We're given emergency use authorization, okay? But anyways, the tests are described, their websites are there, you might be interested in it. I looked at all of them. I'm going to jump to, well, this is the Abbott one. It's got a nice diagram, a little video if you want to watch it. A nice diagram that sort of explains the molecular biology of it all, yada yada. I couldn't find anything on specificity and sensitivity. I did, however, find the specificity and sensitivity on the CellX test. So I'm going to talk a little bit about specificity and sensitivity because it's so important in this whole testing thing. Everybody's screaming, we need more testing, we need more testing. We need good testing, okay? And comparing us against other countries where we are all clueless what the quality of their testing is not a very good metric. Again, look at this through the retrospectoscope when it's all done. You'll be able to judge how great we did or how poorly we did then. let's kind of drill down on why this matters. Okay, so this is just taken from the FDA.gov website. It's the guidance for the industry of FDA staff on reporting results from studies of diagnostic testing. It's an old thing. I'm all the way down to 7.1. If you just go read this document or peruse through it, you will see how complicated it is on a company that wants to develop a test for diagnostic studies, okay? We're not talking about, hey, we need a bunch of tests. Yesterday, why don't we have them yet? This is really, really intense stuff, okay? Here's the deal. The definition of sensitivity. It refers to how often the test is positive when the condition of interest is present. Very important. A non-sensitive test is useless. Specificity refers to how often the test is negative when the condition of interest is absent, okay? Meaning it doesn't tell you something's positive when it isn't. Note, when a diagnostic test where the sensitivity equals 1 minus the specificity, there is no diagnostic value. So, you gotta really know these things to even know if the test is useful. And we don't know what the other countries are running in terms of the quality of these tests. They may be way better than ours. We may be really doing bad. Well, we did 4 million tests faster than anybody else, but they're all terrible. Or we may be way better. Time will tell. All right. Coming down here, we define what sensitivity and specificity is in terms of how you look at this, where they talk about this 2 by 2 square. And it turns out that the one company did a great job. They actually showed their clinical performance here and here. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but basically, they took one group, they had 98 positive serum or plasma samples collected from individuals who had proven positive PCRs. That's the antigen test, the mRNA test, okay? They had virus. And so they took samples from 98 people they knew were positive, and then they compared them to 180 negative samples from existing serum samples from September of 2019 before the virus existed, okay? And of the 98 positives, 91 tested positive, and with IgG or IgM or both, and 180 negative samples, 174 tested negative. All right, I drew a little square for you, okay? Now, so here we go. There were 98 positive samples. These were, oh, by the way, these were people who were mildly ill or asymptomatic but had positive tests. So we got 98 positive tests or positive samples of mildly ill people and 180 that don't samples that don't have COVID-19. Now, the square, these are positives, these are negatives. Our true positives, the 98 that should have all been positive, we had 91 true positives and 7 false negatives, okay? Of the 180 that should have all been negative, we had 6 false positives and 174 true negatives. And by the equation that I showed you, the sensitivity is the true positives, 91, divided by the true positives, divided by the true positives, 91, plus the false negatives, 7, a 92.8% sensitivity. Not too bad. You can live with that. That's a decent test, especially considering these people weren't that sick and we're looking for antibodies. Maybe if you would have tested some of them later, they'd have had them. So that's not all that surprising. Fairly sensitive, okay? The specificity, true negatives, 174, divided by false positives plus true negatives, 96.6%. So when these people that weren't very sick, it was pretty specific. I mean, if they had you would see, I'm sorry, because this was unsick people. It was not likely to give you a positive test if you didn't have it, okay? That's pretty good specificity. All right. Now, the second group, another 30 samples, these were people that were sick with SARS and hospitalized, okay? And here they had 30 positives by PCR in people that were really sick and 70 of those September samples. And they ran them again with this CellX test. 29 true positives, 1 false negative, okay? 70 false positives, 5, true negatives, 65. And the numbers this time come out to 96.6%. So it seems to be more sensitive if you're sick. That would make sense. You would expect the test to be, that's looking for antibodies, to be more sensitive if you wait longer and people are sicker. So I get that. And then the specificity was a little lower, 92.8. Random variation, because they're just, there was just a little bit higher percentage of false positives when they ran it on that set. Okay, so we won't really know how sensitive and specific these tests are until there's giant samples done and they're in use. But this is the beginning of how they have to do all of this. And obviously it takes a little time, guys. So maybe you'll kind of give everybody a break here and just hope that we keep pressing on. We need lots of testing. I think we need testing. I fully anticipate being tested for antibodies relatively soon myself. I was told yesterday in the task force that 20 million antibody tests are probably going to be available by the end of this month. The company Abbott, in their website, they said they would have a million available by the end of this week and 4 million available by the end of the month. So and with 4 companies cranking them out, that's probably realistic. All right, last thing, trying to keep this one short. We just looked at that, sorry. A little quick one here. Recent tests suggest that there is a biologically plausible mechanism for why this COVID-19 knocks out your smell. That's what this study was about. And it's raising the question of whether you couldn't screen yourself based on just trying to be very aware of your sense of smell. Coffee's a great test product, So it's a pretty frequent complaint, this anosmia, you can't smell, and there is a biological plausible mechanism of how the virus is affecting our sense of smell. And then, this is neat. Someday I'm going to really show you guys all about New Amsterdam Genomics, a really great test thing. This company, which I administer this test to some of my patients if they want to do so. I'll tell you up front, the test costs $3,200. It looks at all 22,000 genes. They constantly update it, so if they discover, it's your entire genome sequenced. So if they discover a new gene, they go look at everybody's data again, and if you have that gene and it's impactful or actionable, you get notified. And point in fact, they sent me this the other day because I've had my genome done and I have other patients done, saying, hey, look, they're trying to, help follow COVID, and they've discovered 2 genes, this MBL and the CCL2 genes, that have been linked to higher risk. And they included the references, and I looked at them, but I didn't drill down on them because I went and checked myself and all of my patients, and none of us have the genes. So I emailed all of them and said, hey, great news, New Amsterdam Genomics, they've identified some genes. that can be problematic if you have this COVID-19 disease, and I checked you out, you don't have the genes. They also pointed out that if they are offering a discount if you are positive for COVID-19. They want to do a test on you, so they're offering discounts to those people. So if you guys want to reach out to me, if you know you're positive, I'd be happy to interface and get this test done on you. What they told me to do here, if you wanted to see if you were affected, was that you just go to your diet and exercise lifestyle page under other environmental, and if you have the genes, you would be there. And so, you know, when you go here, this is what the portal looks like, and there's all kinds of ways to surf around. You can look at your highlights, highest risks, you can put in information, the common concerns. But if we do what they say and go to diet and exercise, it's got a lot of cool stuff that would tell you, things you should do, things you shouldn't do, based on varying colors. And these are based on actual genetic studies. It tells you about vitamin, like for example, I have a defect in folate metabolism, and when I got off all the grain I used to eat, my homocysteine went up, which is a marker of blood vessel inflammation and associated with poor cognitive outcomes and poor cardiovascular outcomes. So when I started taking methylation formula, which is a combination of a bunch of B vitamins that does include folate, after my homocysteine climbed, you know, grain in this country is folate fortified, and I kind of gave up a high grain diet when I started my Cinegenics walk. And anyways, my homocysteine, which was around ideal at 9, started climbing up 12 and 13. I got on these highly bioavailable B vitamins, and I dropped it right back down to 9 again. So kind of interesting that I had already done that, but this genetics made me realize why it happened, which was kind of cool. And then a bunch of stuff about exercise and some of the things that it does, and a little bit about your athletic ability, and a lot of these really do hold true for me. I was always pretty good sprinting and in strength, pretty decent endurance. Anyways, kind of cool. But then you get down to other environmental. I don't take aspirin because it's not effective at reducing cardiovascular disease in me. And in another place, under cardiovascular risks, it showed some negative side effects too. But you don't see anything in here about susceptibility to coronavirus infections. So I do not have those traits. Anyways, that's all I got for you today. I'm gonna try to move on pretty quickly. I promised a sleep apnea / sleep lecture, so I'm gonna start working on that. I hope to get that out by tomorrow, and I plan on filming the family doing intervals to kind of get your head wrapped around what stationary equipment, sprint interval training, and high intensity interval training looks like, and just how fun it can be. Anyways, thanks. God bless.